This is one of the oldest examples of money and how money was used. It's probably the oldest bill of exchange in existence today that we have found so far. It's in the British Museum for everyone to see. But millions of people walk past it every day and they look at it and go, wow, that's a cute little tablet. They have no bloody idea what they're looking at. The origins of our human enslavement in clay tablets from 2046 BC. This dumb schmuck came into the temple because the temples were the first banks. The priest kings were the first bankers. They issued the money. This schmuck comes into the temple with silver, and he hands silver to the priest king, and in return he gets what? A piece of clay. That's a great deal, isn't it? And nothing has changed. They create money out of thin air today, just like they created money out of clay in ancient times. Why? Because they put themselves into that position of privilege, and so it continues. The world was run by the same royal bloodline that it was run in ancient times. The banksters that are directly connected to the royal bloodlines of ancient times keep creating money out of thin air. And if you still don't understand how they create money out of thin air, that's what it is. One moment there is nothing, and the next moment there's $10 trillion in their account. You want to see this again? $10 trillion, enter. Ah, there we have $10 trillion. Money out of thin air. Don't let anybody, any academic, any economist, anyone with 20 PhDs try and tell you otherwise. It is a giant scam. It is the largest crime committed against all of humanity. It is the major tool of enslavement. We know who the banking families are. These are just some of the main banking families that have been causing crimes against humanity for hundreds of years. And we understand that they run the world. Once we recognize that these are the bastards that are running the world, we know what to do about it. They run everything. Specifically, the important things here, people, is the education. And I'll point out the education, because if we continue educating our children the same way we're educating them today, they'll just become another one of us 20 years from now, wondering what the hell happened. So we have to, one of the first things we have to do is take our children out of school. Now, I don't know what the situation here is in Bosnia, but the education system today has got nothing to do with learning skills for life. It's got everything to do with creating a future labor force, with people that graduate from university and high school with a certificate. They can't bake a bread, they don't know how to milk a cow, they can't grow food, they can't make cement, they can't build a house, they can't do bloody anything, but they have a certificate that allows them to do what? To look for a job. Isn't that an exciting prospect? So that's what we've got to stop. And it's up to us. Take your children out of school. Start homeschooling them together in groups, larger growing groups of alternative education where we teach our children true skills for life. So that by the time they're 16 years old, they know how to milk a cow, bake bread, grow food, build a bridge, make a free energy device, go to Mars in 10 seconds flat and back, transmutate, dematerialize, create DNA out of thin air, all the stuff we're talking about here. By the time they're 16, they'll know how to do all this stuff. Why? Because they didn't read it from a book, but because they did it hands-on. They know how to do it. They don't need to read about it. That's what we need to become. That's what the education system should be all about. Teaching true skills for life, so that by the time our children in our new communities are 16 years old, they know more than all the professors in the world combined. And that's a world I'd like to see very, very soon in the future. Money is the obstacle to all progress. It is the absolute tool of control. Do not fool yourself. It has infiltrated every crack and crevice of our humanness. It controls every aspect from the moment you breathe your first breath to the last breath you take on this planet. If you think otherwise, you have been fooled. You have to get out of that way of thinking. Money is the obstacle to all progress. The other important thing is that the governments are not our friends. Okay, stop believing that the government is your friend. Oh, but the government is trying its best. No, they're not. They're trying their best to keep you enslaved. Why? Because the governments are run by the bankers. The governments and the large corporations have stolen the countries from their people. Why? Because they've converted our countries into corporations that are controlled by the bankers. And all the central banks are controlled by the same banking families around the world. I think there are no more than 3 central banks left in the world today that are not controlled by the Rothschild, Rockefeller controlled central banks. All our countries are corporations, trading us as stock and our birth certificates on the global stock markets. Here we have an example of South Africa being a corporation. There you go. Companies search for companies. There's Anglo-American. Government of the Republic of South Africa is also a corporation. Every town, every city, every province, every county, every state, every country is a corporation within a larger corporation. And here is there's Lehman Brothers, there's Standard Bank, my favorite bank in South Africa, that I've been up against for 4 years now. And there is Republic of South Africa, the corporation. And it goes on. This is just a short list of other countries, and you can go and do your own research. In my book, Ubuntu Contributionism, I list a lot more countries. I also show the more complicated way in which the United States is incorporatized. So what do people need? We need food, water, love, friendship, homes, tables, chairs, knives, forks, gardens, clothes, technology and healthcare. We need arts and culture and everything and anything we can imagine in this room and beyond. But the one thing we don't need is money. Because money does not make the world go around. People make the world go around. Money does nothing. People do everything. People grow the food. People build the bridges. People develop the technology. And people have the capacity for infinite love. People create the most breathtaking works of art that reduces us to tears. Money cannot do that. Money destroys everything it touches. It is not the love of money, it's the mere presence of money that does all this harm to every single one of us and our entire planet. So what do we do about this? Now that we know what the problem is, we cannot solve the problem using the same tools that created the problem. To quote Albert Einstein, or we can't solve the problem using the same kind of thinking that created the problem. So we not only have to change the tools, but we also have to change the thinking. And this is where it gets really exciting. As we embark on a whole new journey of discovery and imagining a world without money and abundance instead of scarcity, where people live united in communities, working together for the greater benefit of all, rather than greedy benefit for one at the expense of all others. How do we do this? We remove money from the system. In 2005, when this suddenly struck me, I called it contributionism, where everybody contributes towards the greatest benefit of everybody else in their community. Ancient African culture, it is known as Ubuntu, where people live in harmonious, united communities, working towards the greatest benefit of all. There are 5 simple points towards a contributionist Ubuntu society. No money, no barter, no trade, no value attached to anything greater than anything else, because all of our contributions should always be equally valuable. And if you still think that your contribution is more valuable than that person over there, you've got a serious ego problem, and I suggest you go and see a shrink. before you start doing anything else. And then let's start talking again. We're all born equal. We all generate energy. We're all walking expressions of the infinite source. We're all creative souls. Human nature is not to be lazy, as many people will rush out and say, oh, human nature is to be lazy. How dare you make a judgment call on human nature from this position of lobotomized consciousness, where we know nothing about who we are as a species, and we dare to say what human nature is? If we are the infinite expression of the great creation, then clearly human nature must be to create. And that's what we see in little children. First thing we want to do is to create. And that gets beaten out of us as soon as we enter school. So take your kids out of school. Let them create and be future creators of a new reality. The obvious questions when you say a world without money, people go into shock and fear. It's an instant thing. And I've seen this for 10 years now. I must have heard 100,000 questions from people all over the world. 100,000 questions, all coming from a place of fear to start off with. But I can tell you that out of millions of problems we have in the world today, and would you agree that we face millions of problems? Would you agree with that? It's not just a few problems. We're facing millions of problems across the planet. What I can tell you, the best news is that out of hundreds of thousands of questions over a decade, since 2005, I've narrowed it down to 13 most frequently asked questions. 13 problems that people seem to always get stuck on. These are just eight of the first 13 frequently asked questions. So, what I'm telling you here is that hundreds of thousands of people have thought about this, and they all come up with the same hurdles that we need to overcome to live in utopia. So we need to solve 13 problems to live in utopia. And to get there, to get those 13 problems, we have to take money out of the system. So I think the sooner we take the money out of the system and solve these 13 problems, the sooner we get to utopia. And by the way, when you talk about this to people, and they call you, and I've heard this thousands of times, oh, that's just a utopian idea. So, and what is wrong with that? Are you saying that utopia is a bad word? I like utopia, and I want to say it over and over again. I don't like misery. I don't like suffering. I don't like slavery. I don't like toiling away and being miserable, worrying about how I survive from week to week and month to month. I want utopia. That's what I want for me and everybody else. It's a good word. So next time somebody says to you, oh, that's just a utopian idea, tell them, I know, and I like it. A world without money, there is no crime, no envy, no gluttony, no greed, no hoarding, no hierarchy, and especially no hunger. Because we live on a planet of abundance, not a planet of scarcity. The only reason why we have scarcity is because it's controlled by corporations and the corporate greed. Without money, there is no such control and corporate greed to control the supply and the sharing of everything we create. Ubuntu and contributionism is so simple, people, we cannot screw it up. It's impossible to screw it up. Why can I say so? Because it follows the natural laws of things, the natural order of things. It follows the laws of nature. And what I have found in 10 years, in talking to thousands and thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of questions, and every time somebody asks me a question, and they think they're going to stump me, I say, well, have you thought about this? And I go, you know what, you're about the 12,735th person that's asked me that. Oh, okay, well, how are we going to do that? And, oh, okay, that doesn't sound too bad. So I'm going to share an interesting scenario that happened with me in Cape Town in February, while Louise and I were on a tour of our first tour of foreign people that came on tour. Ed was there. He's sleeping now, but he was there. And in this hotel at Monkey Valley, overlooking a beautiful beach, and Sandy was there too. Yes, and there was sharing the little block of rooms right at the top.
was an American English guy who lives in New York, who is the world's largest wine buyer. His name was Montgomery or Marmaduke somebody. Very pompous British name, and he spoke with a very, very pompous British accent, very aristocratic. And we sat in the, outside the rooms with our feet in the pool and started talking, and he told me that they were there in Cape Town on their annual wine buying trip with all the major wine buyers from America, Texas, and all over the place. And then he told me, and he was the son of the world's most famous wine buyer. He gave me his card, I still got it somewhere. And then he asked me, what do you do? At which point I said, okay, well, it's not easy to explain, but I write books about, and I research ancient human history and ancient civilizations, and I also talk about a whole new social structure, moving away from a capitalistic system to a system without money. And that's normally how I gently lead people into what it is that I do, because otherwise, how do you explain to somebody what do you do? In my situation, it's a bit freaky. So eventually I told him about this moneyless society and put in contributions, and it got, eventually it gets there. And I could see he was really perplexed. He was sort of pretending to get it, but not very comfortable with it. And at one stage, I said to him, look, it's a society where everything is available to everyone all the time, because that's how it works, where people create for the benefit of everyone in their community. And you can choose your community where you live, where money doesn't exist. And he said, so who's going to get to drink the best wine? So I thought about it for a few seconds, and I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting to explain to this guy, interesting thing to explain to him. And I said, look, I'm going to have to explain this to you by using a level of understanding of technology and science, so you're going to have to bear with me here. So first of all, I need to ask you, who decides what the best wine is? And he said, well, everybody knows where the best wine is. All the best wine grows in a specific part of France, and there's only 100 square meters that grows the best vines, and the best wine in the world comes from that region in France. And I said, says who? So everybody in my industry knows this. I said, well, you might think it's the best wine, I might think it's the biggest pile of crap. And he got very offended by that. And then I said to him, look, first of all, your argument is a serious problem, because there's a lot of ego and hierarchy attached to that. And so let's just go back and if I explain to you that in a world without money, the technology that exists is such that we can replicate the exact set of circumstances that prevail around that little patch in France, so that we can replicate exactly the same circumstances anywhere else in the world and create the same kind of wine. And he said, oh, what kind of rubbish, I've never heard of that. Aha, you know what I told him. He didn't take that lightly, he was very upset with that. So I said to him, but it goes a little further, In a world without money, where there is no lid on technology, we have already now the technology to reconstruct the molecular structure of your best wine in the world and reconstruct it anywhere else in the world in as many places as we choose to, so that it's exactly the same molecular structure, taste, consistency as your best wine from that little patch in France. So the answer to your question is, who gets to drink the best wine? Everybody. He didn't like that. And I hope by explaining that to you, you allowed yourselves to think about a world without money, where there is no lid on technology. In a world without money, will we be driving in cars? No. Will we be levitating? Possibly, probably. Will we be transmutating? Most likely. Will we be using fossil fuels? Definitely not. Will we be living in the kind of cities we live in today? Definitely not. Will we live in more harmonious communities, in sync and harmony with nature? Absolutely. Not immediately, but eventually. And so it goes. As you allow yourself to think about the world of money, you start releasing these obstacles and the strangle on humanity as we face it today. So, how do we get there? From a money-driven, capitalistic, consumeristic, greed, ugly society, how do we get to a utopian world where everything is available to everyone and we create an abundance for everyone by working together? We get there step by step. I believe that the transition will happen in small steps, and we're going to have to, unfortunately, use money to free ourselves from money. Let me remind you what I said earlier. It is the most powerful control mechanism in all of human history. It has infiltrated every crack and crevice of our humanness. It's not going to be easy to rid ourselves of this disease called money. But that doesn't mean it has to take a long time. We just have to start the process. And the good news is we've already started the process. The Ubuntu movement has members in more than 215 countries around the world. The videos on Ubuntu and contributionism are being watched by dozens of thousands of people every day around the world. The message is spreading very quickly. It's not my system. It's a universal system. I just somehow downloaded this information. I'm sharing it with everybody else. And it's now up to everyone else to start sharing this information with everybody else they know. So, I also believe that the transition will come in small towns. It's a lot easier to unite people in small towns than it is in large cities. And that we have to start working on community projects. And you will see very quickly how we get to a situation of absolute abundance from a few simple community projects. Firstly, we have to get rid of this thing called competition and start working in cooperation. Cooperating and not competing. Let me remind you, your heart doesn't attack your liver doesn't attack your brain doesn't attack your stomach. All the organs and all the cells in this organism called your body work together in coherent harmony for the greatest good of the whole organism. And that's how we're going to work as members of our communities, working together in cooperation. Not in competition. Competition is the worst thing that could ever happen to humanity. Work hard, my son, work hard. One day you can get to the top. And when you get to the top, some arsehole is going to shoot you to get to the top instead of you. You know, that's how it works. And we just don't realize it. And we're all trying so hard to get to the top, not realizing that that's part of the lie. So it's cooperation for the greater good of all, not competition. Energy is the foundation of the system. And I believe that once we have an alternative source of energy or electricity, it becomes very easy to unite people in a community. Once you have an alternative source of electricity in a small community, all you have to do is say, right, everybody has free electricity, uncapped electricity. In return, all you have to do is work for 3 hours a week in one of the many community projects. Whether it's the bakery, the fishery, the metal farm, the wood factory, the dairy, whatever it is that the community decides to do as a community project. 3 hours a week. Let's look at this very quickly. A community of 1,000 people, that's 3,000 hours a week. Can you imagine how much abundance you will create with 3,000 hours a week? There'll be too much bread, too many bridges, too many energy devices, too much milk, too much cheese. There'll be too much everything. We're going to have to slow the hell down. The whole Ubuntu contributionism principle is based on the manufacturing or creating the 3 times principle. It's not a self-sustained community. Self-sustained communities are closed systems, and closed systems are not natural systems. The energy does not flow through them. This is why self-sustained communities have never worked, and they never will work. It's just a bigger extension of me, me, me. It's now us, us, us. Don't climb over our wall. We're a self-sustained community. Get the hell away from us. It's not going to work. Contributionism is based on an open system where you create 3 times as much as you need. so that once you've consumed 1/3 for your community, you make the other 2/3 available to all the communities around you. And once you've done that, can you see what you've achieved? The moment you've done that, you've collapsed the capitalistic system in all your neighboring communities. Capitalism cannot exist in any form whatsoever within the proximity of contributionism. It is not possible. This is why I can say with absolute certainty that we do not have a contributionist community in the world yet, but it's coming. And it's that first tiny little community, whether it's in Bosnia, in South Africa, in Australia, in England, even in Iran, doesn't matter where it is, that first contributionist community will become the seed and the domino effect that creates the spread around the world. It is unstoppable. The only way you'll be able to stop it if large numbers of men with guns arrive from the government to suppress it or overthrow it. At which point I suggest it's probably going to be too late in any case. So, to finish off here, contribute your labor of love. That's what it is. Because in a world without money, there are no jobs. It's just your labor of love, what you love to do for your community. After your 3 hours a week for one of the community projects, remember, that's where you learn new skills. That's where you interact with other members of your community. And because there's 1,000 people, you need a lot of, in this model community, right? 1,000 people, you need a lot of community projects to fill, for 1,000 people. So you'll be doing a lot of things, a lot of different things. Things that we can't imagine today, because today, many of those things are financially not viable. So I spoke about the alternative education. That's one of the key things we need to do, where the community appoints the master teachers, where teachers do not appoint themselves to the Department of Education because they've got a certificate, but because they're truly masters of their trade. No jobs, labor of love. Ubuntu movement has members in more than 215 countries now. In the town of Waterval-Boven, we've started several community projects. Some of them are, the most important one is a food kitchen to feed the poor, the hungry. Every town, every community, every country will have a special set of circumstances that you will have to work with in your own community. That's different from another community. But you'll know exactly what to do for your community. In our community, we have 80% unemployment. 80% unemployment. And yet the people survive. So the first thing we need to do is create a community kitchen to feed the homeless, the hungry, about 200 AIDS orphans, young mothers with HIV children that can never get jobs. It's a big problem. That's why we have crime. Not because people want to steal, because people have no jobs. The moment you create a community kitchen, you relieve a big problem. How do we fund the community kitchen and the food to feed the homeless and the hungry and the aged? We recycle the rubbish dump. All the money that we make from the recycling will go into buying the food for the food kitchen. But now you can't just feed the people. You have to start the whole philosophy of contributionism. Otherwise you're creating a culture of dependency. So, as you can see, several things have to happen at the same time. So we need to create some community projects. The recycling is one of them, before we can initiate the food kitchen. The moment we've got a food kitchen and feed the people, in return they work for 3 hours in one of the community projects, we're already creating abundance in our community, just by simply creating the food kitchen. And contributionism kicks in from the word go. It never starts as a handout, creating a culture of dependency. So this is a very basic philosophy that we're implementing right now in our town. And the more we work on it, the faster it goes. Recycling everything, fixing the town hall that's been completely vandalized so that it can be used for community projects, that also benefit the people, and the money will go into the food kitchen, fixing up the health clinic that looks something like this. This is 20 years of ANC government, by the way. All these things were beautiful installations after the ANC took over from the apartheid government. 5-star installations that were demolished and destroyed and vandalized in a 20-year period. One dictatorship taking over from another. Who was worse? I'll leave it up to you. Sporting facilities are dust bowls, broken down, cannot be used. This is all the stuff we're doing in our community projects. This is what the rugby field looks like on the left. This is what the cricket field looks like on the right. The grandstand and the showers. This is all the stuff we're doing with the community projects and the money that we raise. So when you get emails from me saying we're raising funds for community projects, you get a better idea of what it is we're doing. But I'll be communicating this on a far more detailed scale. This fish farm has been vandalized. It belongs to the municipality. It's a 5-star, state-of-the-art fish farm that can breed 1 million fish a month. We can feed the entire community. And one of those halls, I want to create a mushroom growing plant in one of those huge halls. Those are huge halls. We'll be exporting the mushrooms to the entire province from there. This is a bakery. It's been standing empty for nearly a year. Why? Because the lady that ran it could not afford the electricity bill. So now you start understanding why electricity is such an important foundation of this new kind of community. Food growing gardens, totally vandalized. And this brings me to the end of this presentation, but before I end, I just want to talk about the South African elections and why we turned the Ubuntu movement into a political party. And this is critical, because some people think, oh, you turned this great philosophy into a political party, now you've sold out. No. If you think that, then you don't understand how all this stuff works. Most of the things I've been saying in the public domain are so inflammatory and so dangerous that I could be charged with treason. And treason, you go to jail for life. So, the moment you put this information out there on a political platform, it's your protection. I can say anything I want as a politician, campaigning for a political party. I can say that all women should dye their hair purple, and all men should, wear short pants, or that we're only going to grow food on Thursdays, or our political manifesto could be the weirdest bloody thing you can imagine. It just so happens that our political manifesto says some very fundamental things. Like, we're going to close the central bank and replace it with a people's bank that issues money for the people, by the people, tax-free and interest-free. Not because we want to continue the philosophy of banking, but because that is the first step towards liberating the people from the private central banks. Put it back in the hands of the people. This has happened many times before, with great success. But every single time that happens, in the past, every single time that people's banks have been created, the influence of the banking elite have infiltrated the political arena and reinforced their private banks into those governments through bribery, corruption. Now you can see, even if you have a people's bank, as long as you got money, people will be bribed, corrupted, and money will corrupt everything. And so the People's Bank was just a short interim step to relieve people from their misery, their immediate slavery, and allow them to think freely and take the lid off the pressure. And once people realize that money is available for everything all the time, very soon they realize, well, we need to build a bridge. We're going to go to the People's Bank to get the money for the bridge. We know we're going to get the money. So, why do we have to go to the bank to get the money? Why don't we just build the bridge? Very soon people start realizing that money is just a tool and an illusion that was created as that tool of enslavement. And we'll get rid of it in the way that I've described, or something like that. So, we entered the South African elections on the 7th of May. We had 1 million followers going into the elections. 1 million followers. We expected at least 4 seats in Parliament. How naive could I have been? No idea I had how corrupt and controlled the political election system is. Doesn't matter where you are. I'm not sure how it is here in Bosnia or Slovenia or Croatia. Maybe it's slightly different. And maybe the consciousness has shifted so much that the next elections, wherever they may be, will not be as controlled. Because the cat is out of the bag. So this is the TV commercial that we put out.
Make money out of thin air. Our government knows this, but they're not telling us. This is Michael Tellington, founder of the Ubuntu Party, and I'd like to remind you that South Africa belongs to its people. It does not belong to the government or any other private corporation. The government should always be the servant of the people to deliver on the needs of the people and not enslave its people. But they've sold our roads and our minerals to private foreign companies and enslaved us in debt for life. The Ubuntu Party will create a people's bank. It creates money for the people, by the people, tax-free and interest-free, to free us from economic slavery, creating huge public works in the process and 100% employment. Let us return the country to its people. Vote Ubuntu Party for a people's bank. Money for the people, by the people. Vote Ubuntu.
Thank you. Anyway, and just to finish off, we put out, in the running up to the elections, we put out this little feel-good PR thing, and just you know, some of the work we did. We had 4 weeks into the elections, and I believe we moved mountains. We ended up, out of 1 million followers, we ended up with 8,234 votes. So you know something is wrong with the system, right? And remember why. We were never going to get allowed to get into Parliament. We should be in Parliament right now, but it was never going to happen. And I expected not to get in, but I somehow hoped that maybe we would. They cheated us of at least 200,000 votes, which should have given us at least 4 or 5 seats in Parliament. But that could never happen, because the moment we get into Parliament, it's just a few weeks or few months before the message will start hitting millions of people's homes. Remember that parliamentary sessions are live on television, so they can't hide anything. And imagine if I got up there every day in my little slot to address Parliament, and my message every day was, we need to close the Reserve Bank and replace it with a People's Bank to issue money, tax-free and interest-free, for the people, by the people. How long do you think it'll take the rest of the country to start listening to that message and realizing that that's the only way ahead? Not very long. Because people aren't stupid. They're just brainwashed and confused and traumatized. And once they know, once they wake up and they realize that there is a way ahead, so you're not going to stop it. So right now there are about 12 countries in which we are forming Ubuntu parties. USA, Canada, England, Australia, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and a few others. And I would like to see an Ubuntu party here in Bosnia, in Slovenia, in Croatia, because I believe these countries are perfect opportunities for this thing to happen. Once you get into Parliament, everything changes. And I do believe that in the next 5 years, we will see Ubuntu parties in many governments of the world. For the first time, create a global political movement of consciousness, trans-border, transnational, sharing the same simple philosophy of unity, uniting people around the world that has never happened before in human history. This, to me, is the new age of enlightenment that the prophecy talks about. This is why I say, we are the ones we've been waiting for. We are living in the age of prophecy. It cannot be denied anymore.
Everyone is talking about this beautiful African life philosophy called Ubuntu, but very few people are actually doing anything about it. This is Michael Tellinger, and I want to tell you how the Ubuntu Party will actually make this beautiful life philosophy possible for every single South African. So I would like to remind you that we, the people, appoint the government to act as our servants, to do the best for the people all the time. But our government has failed us dramatically on every level and actually turned the people into the servant of the government. And above all, our economy has been hijacked by international banksters who have been granted complete freedom to financially cripple every South African, plunging us into a life of debt. Pay attention to this. The South African Reserve Bank does not belong to the government. It does not belong to the people. It's a private company that has been given the right to issue the money for the South African people and to dictate the financial policy to the government and in turn to the people of the country. And under the protection of the South African Reserve Bank, all our banks are being given complete freedom to create money out of thin air that they then lend to unsuspecting people at compounded interest, turning all of us into debt slaves for the rest of our lives. So based on these facts, the Ubuntu Party proposes to do the following: to restructure the entire banking system to serve the people and not to enslave the people, to establish a people's bank instead of the South African Reserve Bank that creates money for the people, by the people, and in this case the money will be tax-free and interest-free with 100% employment as a result, and stop the financial enslavement. We need to support our scientists and inventors to deliver a renewable source of free or almost free energy for every South African. We need to support our traditional healers and the research scientists to go back to basics and find alternative cures for all disease, to prevent the drug cartels from hiding such cures from the people, because we know that cures for diseases have been found and can be released to the people. We need to support our farmers at every level to grow organic food and move away from genetically modified organisms and get rid of giants like Monsanto who are poisoning our farms and poisoning our lands and poisoning our foods. We need to plant food gardens across the nation so that no South African ever goes hungry again. We need to decentralize the government so that people can govern themselves in their own communities, taking care of their own needs immediately, supported by the People's Bank. Because once we have a People's Bank, all the needs of the people, wherever they may live, will be provided for. And therefore, there will be no worry about job security, because jobs will be created for whatever needs to be done, supported by the People's Bank. And finally, we need to restructure the judiciary and the legal system completely, to be written by the people, for the people, unlike the unjust legal system we face in our courts today, which holds the rights of corporations above the rights of living, breathing human beings. United we stand. That's what Ubuntu is all about. For those that think that this is a pipe dream, I need to tell you that this has been done many times in the past with great success. And this is exactly what we want to recreate in South Africa, to bring this relief to the people that so desperately need it. Viva Unity, Viva Abundance for all, Viva Ubuntu. Hope to see you on the 7th of May.
Thank you very much. So, to finish off here tonight, and the Ubuntu book has been translated into Francais as well, by the way. So, it should be finished by now. So my message to you tonight is, don't just sit with this information. Go out there and tell everybody. Share your knowledge with others. Become a seed of consciousness, and tell everyone you know, because once they hear it, they cannot unhear it. And even if you're scared and you're not quite brave enough to share this information with the people, buy them a Ubuntu book and give it to them. It's a lot easier, then you don't have to argue with them. And if you can't afford it, if you just want to share this, then just go find a pharmaceutical convention somewhere, think these thoughts and go stand in the door and just throw your energy at them, and they'll get it. They'll get the message from your body language and your energy. And so go out there, be a seed of consciousness, and share the information. Thanks for listening. I hope I've given you something to take home. Thank you very much.